darf ich mit einem kurzen Zitat anfangen, ganz am Ende des Buches.
I'll start reading out the book at the very end, and maybe it will fit our conversation. It's a telephone call at the very end, which will remain in German because this is not as quickly as that available in English from the book.
Nach 8 Jahren sprachen wir das erste Mal wieder miteinander. So endet Fabio Geda's Buch.
Well, this is the end of Fabio Geda's book in the series Crocodiles. The subtitle is The Story of Enaiatollah Akbari. It also shows parallels to Akim Rent, Akim Kur. It's a universal topic, and Christiane Burkhardt, you translated the book. And maybe to start with, I would like to ask you, what is your experience from translating? And when you accompanied Fabio Geda during his reading tours, you did that as well. Now, what did that mean to you as a translator, this experience, cooperation with the author?
Also ich habe das Buch.
Es fängt an.
Sie verstehen mich alle nicht gut.
You will hear me now. I was given the book from the publishing house and was asked to translate it. And started to read it, first of all, and right from the start I was enthused by it. The real danger there is if you have the report of a refugee child, it's an Afghan child, an Afghan boy, and the danger is that it's very emotional, very sentimental. You saw that here with Bardola, that on the one hand she tried to protect the children against the most cruel things and just have the images tell the story. So it's a language, there's an interplay between text and picture. And this trick, so to speak, is what Fabio Geda was not able to use, of course, because the book had to convince through its language. According to my opinion, he achieved this because he is playing with different literary genres. So it's a sort of adventure story, plus a story of a small boy who, well, is exposed, if you like, by his mother. So she has to protect him against the Taliban. She takes the boy to the neighbouring country, to Iran. In Iran they stay overnight in a small hotel, and when the boy wakes up the next morning, the mother is gone. And what follows is a long journey, 8 years through different, or 5 or 6 years through different countries. And the boy actually managed to gain a foothold in Italy. And well, after really managed to get a permanent residence, he actually allows himself to call her his mother, and then the circle gets complete. This is what you read out to us. It's a sort of adventurous story with a good end. It's a real odyssey. It's, different adventures the boy has to go through, but it's a real problems he has to tackle. It's not sort of methodological figures or monsters, but it's real life, it's war, it's expulsion, violence that he has to deal with. And this is covered by Fabio Geda with a sort of poetic language, reminding us of the Arabian Nights, while we go back to the stories that Akim read in the refugee camp. And Professor Esse also pointed out that if you can count stories well, then you will survive. And this is also seen here in this book by Fabio Geda. I mean, it's really, language-wise, well achieved. It's a stylistic manifold, what we see here. And maybe you read something out to us? What is important to you from that story, just to get an insight into the style? Maybe first in Italian to get a feeling for the language, and then in German? Yes. At the beginning I read out one paragraph where he finds out that his mother is no longer there. First in Italian to get the feeling for this wonderful melody of the author, and then later on I read it out in German.
Mamma, ho chiamato, nessuna risposta. Allora sono uscito da sotto le coperte, mi sono infilato le scarpe, ho stropicciato gli occhi e sono andato a cercare il padrone che comandava quel posto, per chiedere se l'avesse vista, dato che appena arrivati 3 giorni prima aveva detto che nessuno entrava o usciva dal Samma casi senza che lui se ne accorgesse, cosa che a me è sembrata strana, perché supponevo che anche lui avesse bisogno di dormire di tanto in tanto.
This is the wonderful melody of the Italian language. And now you read out in German, and this is read out in English. This is the official English translation of the book. Mother, I called. No answer. So I got out from under the covers, put my shoes on, rubbed my eyes, and went to find the owner of the place to ask if he'd seen her. Because 3 days earlier, as soon as we arrived, he told us that no one went in or out without him noticing, which seemed odd to me, since I assumed that even he needed to sleep from time to time. Covering my eyes with my hand, because of the light, I walked up to the owner, Kaka Rahim, and apologized for bothering him. I asked about my mother, if by any chance he'd seen her go out, because nobody went in or out without him noticing, right? Kaka Rahim was smoking a cigarette and reading a newspaper written in English, some of it in red, some in black, without pictures. He had long lashes, and his cheeks were covered with a fine down like those fur peaches you sometimes get, and next to the newspaper and the table at the entrance was a plate containing a pile of apricot stones, along with 3 succulent-looking orange-coloured fruits still uneaten, and I had a handful of mulberries. There's a lot of fruit in Creta, Mother had told me. She had said it to entice me, because I love fruit. In Pashtun, Quetta means fortified trading center or something like that, a place where goods are exchanged, objects and lives. Quetta is the capital of Baluchistan, the fruit garden of Pakistan. Without turning round, Kaka Rahim blew smoke into the sun. Yes, he replied, I saw her. I smiled. Where did she go, Kaka Rahim? Can you tell me? Away. Away where? Away. When will she be back? She's not coming back. She's not coming back? No. What do you mean, Kaka Rahim? What do you mean she's not coming back? She's not coming back. At that point, I ran out of questions. There must have been others I could have asked, but I didn't know what they were. I stood there in silence, looking at the down on Kaka Rahim's cheeks, but without really seeing it. It was Kaka Rahim who spoke next. She told me to tell you something, he said. What? Koda negada. Is that all? No, there was something else. What, Kaka Rahim? She said not to do the 3 things she told you not to do. Thank you very much. And the 3 things you're not allowed to do, well, this is actually the red thread throughout the entire book. Namely, don't use violence, or don't use weapons, don't take drugs, and don't steal. These are the three things that she told him, the three wishes actually that she gave him. And the mother actually leaves him alone. She is just vanishing. He wakes up alone. During the readings, for example, youngsters or others, or even parents, how did they react to that? And how does Enaiatollah see that himself? Well, he's actually, you could call him a co-author of the book. Now, how does he describe this being left alone by your own mother? Being alone suddenly. Well, I have not yet met Enaiatollah, but in the past he travelled with the author. When the book was finished, he went to schools, etc. Well, he is actually the co-author of the book and also gets income from the book, so it's spread at 50-50. So you also go to the actual hero or narrator of the book. But at some point, Enaiat didn't want to only deal with his past, but also now wanted to look into the future. So at that point, he decided to also study political sciences, politics, and Geda then travelled alone. I only experienced Fabio Geda. It was very interesting to do this tour with him. The tour took place with the White Ravens Festival, which is also sponsored by the International Book Fair Project. You also see books here by them. This festival takes place every 2 years, and I travelled through Bavaria with Fabio Geda. We went to lower secondary schools and higher secondary schools, and also where Italian was taught as a subject, or at schools where there was no Italian taught at all, and schools where we had 11-year-old children who were actually of the age of Enaiat when he was left alone by his mother, up to pupils working for their A-levels. And of course there's a whole range of topics to be addressed here. You could talk about the long journey or the adventurous part of the book. It's a fascinating novel in the end. And you could also ask a lot of political questions and mention here, for example, the migration issue. And when I was travelling with Fabio Geda in Italy, for example, there was both. Italy was a country from which people emigrated. We also had many guest workers from Italy in the 60s, and many young people are leaving the country today. And they also come to Germany because they say the society is not on the move, there's nothing moving in the country anymore, you cannot have a career there. But at the same time, of course, we see the pictures, for example, Lampedusa, the refugees landing there. So it's also somehow between the worlds, it's a sort of interface. And one topic could have been addressed, and we tried to, but it was very interesting that the pupils didn't address this at all. I think the teachers tried to prepare them. It was shortly before the summer break, summer holidays. They were not so interested in it. I think the real life of a refugee was just too far away from it. What they were interested in actually were the personal things. Well, did he find his mother again? Well, the book ends that the two are on the telephone line with each other. But unfortunately, he was not able to meet his mother again. He was not able to leave the country. It took long until he was a recognized refugee and was granted asylum. And before he was not able to leave the country, and when he was allowed to leave the country, the mother was sick and died. It's not such an happy end as you wish for when you read the end of the book. No, of course, the mother was certainly very proud and happy that he made his way. And of course, from the mother's perspective, it's a sacrifice to just leave a child alone, that you have to leave a child alone. The father was a lorry driver, and presumably he was stealing goods from the company, and money was to be gotten from the company. So actually the children were sort of used as slaves to, well, actually reduce the debt burden, and therefore they tried to bring the son away out of the country, and also because the Taliban made it impossible to live a normal life. Schools were closed. And this would again be the next passage I would like to read out to you, actually. But maybe briefly, you also mentioned the difficulties when you try to impart and present the book. Oh, and the book is absolutely successful. It's a bestseller, actually. But now you said the children and youngsters are interested in the personal things and not really in the story of the refugee. How do you deal with that book? What do you do in a classroom full of children or youngsters to make sure and to explain quickly? I mean, if you start out reading, you won't stop, but to make clear that the book is such a great book. What is the best approach to make it a fascinating reading? I think it's the adventurous part of the book. Maybe it's the age. I mean, when we came to the lower secondary school, I was actually looking forward to it, but it was a difficult topic also for 11-year-olds, and what they will have as questions, etc. And I have to say, this was the best hour we had there in the library. We met them in the library. The children were well prepared. They read the book beforehand. They discussed the passages with their teacher. And we had a whole range of pictures that they had prepared for us, and crossing the mountains, the lorries, and also crossing the ocean, the crocodiles, the huge danger. Of course, it was also given in the title. Maybe we could have a look at the route of the journey. You see an adventurous long journey that he had to go through alone. He was 11-12 years old, so he just tried to do everything. Traffickers, he had a job to do, etc. And then the issues that are very important and were important to Fabio as well, because you hear it time and again, well, yes, they just all come here, we don't have space enough, they all want to come to Germany. But they don't all want to go to Germany and Italy. It's very clear here in our story. Without knowing, the boy was left alone, spent a few months in Greta in this hotel, but only because he was fortunate and just won over the sympathy of Rahim and just helped him with everything. For example, just clean some fishes and then carry out dirty things. This is what he was used for. But at some point in time, the owner of the hotel said, well, you can't stay, I don't need you anymore. And then he found other boys in the same situation. And they did some street dealing, sold lighters, etc. and tried to earn a sort of living from that. And they found out how to sell, and of course they were under attack also from rivaling sellers and dealers in the street and all those things. But you notice that you don't get far. Of course, There are stories, yeah, a friend of mine, he made it to go to Iran, and there's real work there, etc. And this was then the next stage, to go to Iran, where he worked on a building site. It's very strongly, impressively described here on a building site. I mean, it's mainly work for adults. And they actually didn't leave the building site for years. They moved from building site to building site, sort of hidden as illegal workers. And they were always afraid of the police doing rallies. And they just sent the boys to buy food, for example, because boys, well, are just easier to send and easier to hide and to do those things. Well, you learn a lot about the realities that are just unknown mostly to us, and that are not transported, not transmitted via the normal media. But now we read, also to get the intense mood of the novel. We read the closing of the school, when he was actually still at home. He reminds himself of how the school was closed. And this may be also interesting, how Afghan pupils react to the closing of the school. And if you remember, for example, what German pupils would say when their school was closed.
Ja, vorab vielleicht wirklich nochmal einen Satz, wo nochmal an die Heimat denkt.
Oh, he's thinking of his home, and he's also yearning for his home. I'd never have chosen to leave now, but my village was a good place. It wasn't technologically advanced, there was no electricity. For light we used oil lamps, but there were apples. I would see the fruit being born, the flowers opening in front of my eyes and becoming fruit. I know flowers become fruit here too, but you don't see it happen. Well, now this is everyday school life. The teacher was talking about numbers and teaching us to count. Well, before that, yes, before that they well, do some tournament with cooked sheep bones and build dragons, etc. Same as in our schools, there are more fascinating things than learning to count. But the teacher is telling them how to count. When we heard a motorbike driving round and round the outside of the school as if looking for the front door, even though it wasn't all that difficult to find. Then we heard the engine being turned off. A huge Taliban appeared in the doorway. He had one of those long beards they all have. The Taliban came into the classroom carrying a rifle and said in a loud voice that the school had to be closed immediately. The teacher asked why. "My chief's orders," the man replied. "You have to obey." And he left without waiting for a reply or giving any other explanation. Our teacher didn't say anything, didn't move, just waited until the noise of the engine had petered out, and then picked up the math lesson exactly where it had been interrupted, in the same calm voice, and with the same shy smile on his face. Because my teacher was actually quite a shy person, he never raised his voice, and when he shouted at us, it was as if it hurt him more than it hurt us. The next day the Taliban came back, the same one riding the same motorbike. He saw that we were in class, and that our teacher was giving a lesson. He came in and asked the teacher, "Why haven't you closed the school?" "Because there's no reason to close it. The reason is that Mullah Omar has given the order." "That's not a good reason." "Don't blaspheme. Mullah Omar says the Hazara school had to be closed." "And where will our children go to school?" "They won't go. School isn't for the Hazara." This is the tribe there. Well, this school is. This school is against the will of God. This school is against your will, you mean. You teach things that God doesn't want taught. Lies, things that contradict His word. We teach the boys to be good people. What does that mean, to be good people? Let's sit down and talk about this. There's no point. I'm telling you, Being a good person means serving God. We know what God wants from men and how to serve Him. Few people don't. We also teach humility. The Taliban passed between us, breathing hard, the way I did once when I got a stone stuck up in my nose. Without another word, he walked out and got back on his motorbike. The third morning was an autumn morning, the kind when the sun is still warm, and although the first snow is blowing in the wind, it doesn't chill the air, just gives it a certain flavour. A perfect day for flying kites. We were practicing a Hazara poem in preparation for the Chirangi, a poetry contest, when 2 jeeps full of Taliban drove up. We ran to the windows to look at them. All the children in the school leaned out to have a look, even though we were afraid. 20, maybe 30 armed Taliban got out of the jeep, and the same one we'd seen twice before came to the classroom and said to the teacher, "We told you to close the school. You didn't listen to us. Now we are going to teach you." The Taliban made everyone, children and adults, go outside. They ordered us to form a circle in the yard. The children in front, because we were shorter, and the adults behind. Then they made our teacher and the headmaster stand in the middle of the circle. The headmaster was pulling at the material of his jacket as if trying to tear it, and weeping and turning this way and that, looking for something he couldn't find. But our teacher was silent as usual, his arms hanging by his sides, and his eyes open, but turned inwards. I remember he had beautiful eyes that dispensed goodness to everyone around him. "Goodbye, boys," he said. They shot him in front of everyone. From that day on, the school was closed. And without school, life is like ashes. Thank you. Well, there were also some funny bits, and Fabio Geda actually knows how to change the way of telling the story. I've got 3 passages selected that I would read out now, and maybe we could talk about how he does it. So this makes the book so interesting, because it is fascinating to read, because this goes backwards and forwards. The quote is now not available to the interpreter.
Die ich in Isfahan kennengelernt habe, dieses Buch liest, soll er es wissen, denn vermutlich habe ich es niemals ausgesprochen. Es ging mir gut dort auf der Baustelle. Also, danke nochmal. Das ist O-Ton.
Well, this is actually what he writes here in the book. So he uses actually the book as a sort of letter. Was that translated in Farsi and other languages? I don't know really. Who knows whether they read it there in the building site? And there's also a sort of footnote that also is interrupting the narrative. The quote again is not available to the interpreters.
In den folgenden Zeilen kommt niemand ums Leben und man verpasst auch nichts, was für den weiteren Verlauf der Geschichte wichtig wäre. Mein Sprachproblem bestand darin, dass ich nicht gut Iranisch sprach. Die beiden, für die englische Übersetzung, das ist Seite 79, die Fußnote. Die beiden sprachen Farsi und Dari. Gedankenstück, die übrigens auf der letzten Silbe betont werden. Also Farsi und Dari ähneln sich zwar, aber das im Iran gesprochene Farsi unterscheidet sich sehr von dem...
Their language, Farsi, is similar to Dari, which is an Eastern dialect of Farsi spoken in Afghanistan, but the accent of Farsi isn't exactly like that of Dari. They are written in exactly the same way, but Farsi and Dari have very different accents. So this is a footnote in the English version. This is an interruption actually of the narrative. It's fun to read it. And it really matches our topic here today, writing between worlds, different worlds, because it's also sort of knowledge of the culture that is imparted to him. And you have passages in italics where there's a sort of dialogue between Geda and Enaiat. This is sort of the original script of the narrative. Enaiat is, well, explaining that. He's talking about McDonald's actually. Quote again is not available to the interpreters. And then you see Fabio Geda introducing intermediate passage about McDonald's.
Er war so groß wie eine Ziege, nur um dann plötzlich Vergleiche mit McDonald's oder Baseball anzustellen. Warum ist das verrückt? Weil beides so verschiedene Kulturen, ja, fast schon gegensätzliche Welten stammen, zumindest in meinen Augen. Das mag schon sein, Fabio, aber inzwischen trage ich beide Welten in mir. Das ist mir auch aufgefallen beim Lesen des Buches.
This is what I noticed when I read the book, also when we think of the topic of the conference. And maybe, if you agree, we talk about the passage of the feeling for time, because he really wants to have a watch. It's his big dream to buy a watch during his journey, just a normal watch. Now, what is the feeling of time Enaiat has during his journey, and how this is explained for the readers? Would you like to read that out? Maybe I could add, I mean, there's a special voice, of course, also. Of course, this is Fabio Geda, the author. But the main part is the original voice of Enaiat. And what the pupils always asked on her tour, how did you meet Enaiat? And he said, yes, it was during a reading. And I wrote different books already. This was predecessor. And Emil's Wundersame Reise. This was also a book I was able to translate. A Romanian boy in that case was a refugee, and the father was expelled to the home country, and he travels across Europe to see his grandfather. And on such a reading I met Enaiat and in Turin, and was just telling his story, and they talked to each other, and Geda said it was unbelievable. He was 18 years old, Enaiat was 18 years old. Despite everything he witnessed, he was not bitter at all, he was not negative, not envious of what others had, were able to go to school, etc., or have families. He had sort of fun and humour. Well, someone who just left the country to go through adventures like in a fairy tale, but also had to learn how you feel when you experience fear. And this is actually was the very origin of how the book was created. The two met, and half a year they did interviews, and Enaiat explained his story. Fabio noted that down and also put it in a story, and then they met again to check the book, and Enaiat said, yes, this is right, I know this is wrong, or I would never say it like this. So this was then actually done in, well, together. Enaiat, as I said, was actually the hero. He had to get an adult early on, but is still a boy at some point with normal wishes that boys just have. And one of those wishes is a watch, and he's working hard for it in Iran, in a company, in a factory where rocks are processed. Whenever rocks arrived in the factory, they were cut using these huge machines, some as big as my house in Nava. The noise was incredible. There was water everywhere. You put on boots, it was obligatory, and a plastic overall, and some people even covered their ears with headphones. But with all that water on the ground and that stone dust in the air, it was difficult to stay healthy and avoiding getting sick. Not just staying healthy, it was difficult staying alive or in one piece. From time to time, one of the workers operating the machines, those huge machines that broke up the stones like terracotta and sliced through them like butter, would lose a piece of his body, an arm, a hand, a leg. We worked long hours, sometimes 14 hours a day. And when you're tired, it's easy to get distracted. One afternoon, after I'd been in the factory for a few months, I was lifting a really heavy stone, more than 2 meters long, when I lost my balance. And the stone fell and shattered on the ground. With a crash you could hear all over the factory, and one sharp piece hit my foot. It tore my trousers, sliced through my boot, scraped my calf, and made a deep cut in the back of my ankle. You could see the bone. I screamed and sat down, clutching my leg. One of the factory foremen came running. He told me the stone was an important delivery, and heads would roll because it was broken. In the meantime, I was losing blood. "Get up," the man said to me. I pointed out that I was injured. "You have to think of the stone first. Pick up the pieces now." I asked if I could dress the wound. "No," he said, but he was referring to the stone, not dressing the wound. I started to pick everything up, hopping on one leg with the blood soaking my trousers and dripping out of the boot. I didn't even faint, just thinking of that. I don't know how I managed. I mightn't be able to do it today. I finished picking up the scattered pieces, then, still hopping, went to disinfect and bandage the wound. To do that, I had to peel off a piece of flesh. I still have the scar today. And for a while, I couldn't play football. Giving the gaping wound and everything, for a while I worked only in the kitchen. One day, as I was going to do the shopping, I saw a beautiful watch in the shop window. It was made of rubber and metal and didn't cost too much. I've already said, I'm not mistaken, that I'd often thought about having a watch, just to give some meaning to the passing of time, a watch that would show the date and tell me how much I was aging. So when I saw the particular watch, I counted the money I had in my pocket, and even though I didn't have much, I realized I could buy it. So I went in and did it. I bought the watch. Leaving the shop, I swear, I was beside myself with joy. It was the first watch I'd ever had in my life. I kept looking at it and lifting my wrists so that I could see the sun reflected in the dial. I would have run all the way to Nala just to show it to my brother. How envious he would have been. But running all the way to Nala would have been a problem, so I ran to have it blessed at the shrine of Fatima al-Mazuma, one of the holiest places in Shia Islam, and one of the most appropriate, so I believed, for blessing something that means a lot to you, the way my watch did to me. I rubbed the watch against the wall of the shrine to purify it, but taking care not to scratch it. I was so happy with my watch. There was a moment when I even thought that, despite the danger of losing a finger or whatever, I might stay in Qom for a long time. Thank you very much, Christiane Burkhardt. You see here then, next is Tehran, and he moves on to Istanbul and many other stations. There are many surprises and adventures at every station. And Enaiat is getting more adult and is growing up. Unfortunately, we also have to look at our watch. And maybe what would be interesting, he doesn't know how old he is because this was not fixed when he was born in the documents. There's no community book that registers the birth. So later on, his birth date was just fixed at random. I think the 1st of September was just fixed. I mean, he had the choice. It was just estimated, so presumably he's 26 today. Well, our time is now coming to an end, but again, to the feeling of time, being on the journey, being on the escape, means that the past is just too difficult to look back. And future, you cannot really think of future, so the present is what is important. You live from one moment to the next moment, from one stage to the next, you just survive. And this watch is just a symbol to just get out of this feeling of time and get a horizontal movement of time, that we know that you can plan ahead, you can look into the future. This is what we wish many people who come here, that they manage to also design and build their own future. Thank you, Christiane Burkhardt.